He had always loved the sound of the piano. Even when he was very young, he would sit in front of any piano he could find and press the keys, making sounds that felt like a language only he understood. His fingers moved in ways that seemed natural, as if the music came through him rather than from him. People around him often noticed his gift, but few gave it the chance to shine. Most adults nodded politely and said he had potential, but they rarely did more than that. They thought it was just a hobby, something that wouldn't go anywhere. As he grew older, his love for music did not fade. He practiced every day, sometimes for hours, even when he had to wake up early for school or come home tired from work. The piano became his friend, his companion through loneliness and hardship. It was the one place where he felt free, where the noise of the world didn't matter. He could make the piano cry, laugh, and sing, and it never asked anything in return. He dreamed of sharing his music with the world. He wanted to play in front of people who would feel what he felt when he pressed each key. But the path was not easy. Opportunities were rare, and every place that seemed like a chance ended in disappointment. The local community hall told him that there wasn't enough space for him to perform. A small music cafe said they were fully booked. Even the youth program at the cultural center turned him away, saying they had no openings for new performers. Each rejection stung, but he refused to let it crush him. He told himself that one day, someone would see what he could do. Until then, he would keep playing. He played on street corners, in parks, and in quiet rooms where no one came. Sometimes a passerby would pause for a moment and smile, or drop a coin in his case, but most people walked by without a second thought. That was fine. It was not about money. It was about the music, the feeling, the connection. He often watched other performers, trying to learn from them. He noticed how some had confidence that made the crowd listen even before they played a single note. He noticed the timing, the way they smiled, how they made the audience feel welcome. He wanted that, but he also wanted to be himself. He did not want to copy anyone. He wanted his music to speak for who he was. Life outside of music was not easy. His family had little money, and there were bills to pay, chores to do, and responsibilities that kept him busy. There were days when he felt exhausted, when it would have been easy to give up the piano and focus only on survival. But every time he touched the keys, a spark would return, reminding him why he could not quit. The piano was not just an instrument. It was hope. One day he heard about a local talent show. It was small, not well advertised, but it promised a chance for new artists to perform. He thought this might be his opportunity. He prepared a piece he had been working on for months, one that had become his favorite. It was not flashy, but it carried emotion, depth, and a story that only music could tell. He practiced every day, making sure every note, every pause, every crescendo felt right. He imagined the audience, imagined their faces lighting up, and it made him practice harder. When the day of the audition came, he felt nervous. His hands shook slightly, and his stomach was full of butterflies. He carried his music sheets carefully and walked into the small room where the judges waited. They looked at him briefly, not very impressed at first glance. He could tell they were busy, distracted, not expecting much from a young, unknown pianist. He started to play. At first, it felt like the room was empty, as if the music had no place to go. The judges listened, polite but neutral, nodding occasionally. He could feel their skepticism. After a few minutes, one of them shook their head and whispered something to the others. He kept playing, letting the music flow, but inside, he felt a pang of worry. Was this going to end the way everything else had ended? Would they say no? When the last note faded, there was silence. The judges exchanged glances, and then the words came, "We're sorry, but we don't think this is right for the show." He felt a lump in his throat, a mixture of sadness and frustration. He had hoped just a little that this time would be different, but it was the same as always. He packed his sheets quietly and left the room without saying a word. Outside, he took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. He knew the disappointment would not last forever. He remembered all the times he had felt this way before and how he had kept going. He walked to the nearest park and sat on a bench, letting the cool breeze brush against his face. He closed his eyes and imagined playing for an audience that understood him, that felt every note as deeply as he did. He played the piece again silently in his mind, and for a moment, the world seemed brighter. That evening, he went home and sat at the old upright piano in his living room. The keys were worn, some sticking slightly, but it didn't matter. He played the same piece, this time for no one but himself. Each note carried the weight of his frustration, his dreams, and his hope. By the end, his fingers ached, but his heart felt lighter. He knew he could not give up. He could not let the rejection define him. Over the next few weeks, he continued to practice, not for any show or audience, but for the music itself. He explored new pieces, experimented with rhythm and harmony, and poured everything he had into learning and growing. People around him began to notice the change. Neighbors who had once walked by paused to listen. A friend mentioned how the music seemed different, more confident, more alive. Slowly, he began to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone would see what he had to offer. He started looking for other opportunities, no matter how small. He sent letters and emails to local cafes, community centers, and small venues, asking if he could perform. Most of them ignored him or said no. But he refused to be discouraged. Every no was a challenge, a reason to play better, to be ready for the moment when someone finally said yes. At night, he would dream about that moment. Walking onto a stage, hearing the applause, seeing faces light up with emotion. It was not about fame or money. It was about sharing the music he loved, about making people feel something they could not find in words alone. That dream kept him going, even when the days were long and the rejections piled up. He began to realize that the journey itself was teaching him something important. It was not just about the performance. It was about patience, perseverance, and belief in oneself. He learned to listen deeply, not only to the piano but to his own heart. He learned that setbacks were not failures but lessons, guiding him towards something bigger than he could imagine. As the months passed, he felt a quiet strength growing inside him. He was no longer just a young pianist trying to be noticed. He was an artist, committed to his craft, willing to face rejection and disappointment with courage. And somewhere, in the back of his mind, he held on to the hope that one day, someone would finally say yes. That hope, fragile yet persistent, kept him playing, one note at a time, until the world could hear the music he had been carrying all along. After the disappointment of the last audition, he did not stop. Each rejection had hurt, but it also fueled something inside him. He knew his music had value, even if others could not see it yet. Every morning, he would wake up and play for hours, letting the melodies fill his small room and the corners of his mind. Each note was a reminder that he was still moving forward. One afternoon, while playing at a small community park, a stranger stopped to listen. The man was older, dressed neatly, and had a kind expression. He did not just drop a coin and walk away. Instead, he stood quietly, listening to the way the pianist's fingers danced across the keys. When the last note faded, the man clapped softly and said, "You have something special. You should not keep it hidden." At first, he felt surprised. People usually walked by without notice. This stranger's words felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. They gave him hope, a reason to believe that maybe someone would see his music the way he felt it himself. The man introduced himself as someone who knew a little about organizing events and said he might be able to help him find a chance to perform. He offered advice, practical steps, and even encouragement that felt real, not empty words. He took that advice seriously. He spent days rewriting his pieces, thinking about how each one would sound to an audience who had never heard him before. He experimented with pacing, with emotion, with the rise and fall of the music. He wanted to tell a story with every performance, not just play notes. He wanted people to feel what he felt inside. Meanwhile, he faced small setbacks. The piano in his home was old and needed repairs. The community halls were still difficult to access. Friends and family, while supportive, did not always understand his obsession with music. There were moments when he felt lonely, when he wondered if all his effort would ever be noticed. But he reminded himself that the music was worth it. Every hour spent practicing, every moment of frustration, was shaping him into a better musician. He started to perform in small ways, in places that were not auditions but gave him exposure. He played at charity events, for small gatherings, and sometimes even for neighbors who had nothing to do but enjoy the music. Each time he played, he learned something new about connecting with people, about the power of music to reach hearts quietly. He noticed how a simple change in tempo or emphasis could make someone smile, or wipe a tear, or lean forward in attention. That knowledge became his guide. Then came a small opportunity. A local cafe, known for hosting amateur musicians, called him after hearing about him from a friend of the stranger who had stopped in the park. They said they had a free slot on a Friday evening and wondered if he could perform. It was not a big audience, but it was a stage and it was real. He said yes immediately, almost not believing it. He spent the next week preparing meticulously. Every piece was polished. He practiced in the cafe, imagining the audience, imagining the lights and the sounds of cups clinking in the background. The night arrived. The cafe was cozy, filled with a mixture of regular patrons and curious newcomers. He felt his heart race as he carried his music and approached the small stage area. As he sat at the piano, he could feel the weight of all the past rejections on his shoulders, but also the strength he had built. He took a deep breath and let his fingers find the keys. From the first note, something shifted. The audience, at first polite but distracted, became quiet. They leaned in, listening to the music, as if it had a voice that spoke to them directly. He could feel their attention, their curiosity, and it made him play with more courage. Every note carried the story of his struggle, his hope, his joy, and even his sadness. It was not just a performance. It was an opening of his heart. After the performance, there was a long pause, and then the clapping began. It started softly, then grew louder. People smiled, some with tears in their eyes. They approached him afterward, praising not only his skill but the feeling behind it. For the first time, he realized that music could bridge the gap between him and others. It was a connection that did not need words. That night, he left the cafe with a sense of accomplishment, but also a new understanding. Music was not just about being seen. It was about being heard and felt. In the days that followed, his confidence grew. The stranger who had encouraged him came by again and offered to introduce him to other venues and events. He learned how to communicate his story, how to explain his music without losing its authenticity. He began to see that talent alone was not enough. Courage, persistence, and the willingness to seize opportunities were equally important. He continued to perform wherever he could, slowly building a small following. People remembered him, spoke about him, and shared their experiences. He met other musicians, formed connections, and learned from them. But he also remained true to his style, never copying, never changing who he was for anyone else. Each performance, small or large, became a step closer to his dream. There were still challenges. Some venues still said no. Some audiences were indifferent. Some nights, he went home exhausted and frustrated. But now, he had experienced the taste of recognition, and it made the setbacks easier to bear. He knew that if he kept working, kept playing, and kept believing, more doors would open. He spent time reflecting on what had changed. It was not just the stranger's encouragement, or the chance at the cafe. It was his own growth, his resilience, and the understanding that every note, every effort mattered. Music had taught him patience, perseverance, and the value of believing in oneself. He had learned that even small moments could lead to greater opportunities if he stayed committed. He also noticed how his music affected others. Friends who had never cared about piano began to listen, to ask questions, to be moved. Neighbors paused to hear him play, children stopped to watch, and older people shared memories that his music seemed to awaken. That impact, subtle but real, reinforced his belief that he was on the right path. By the end of the part, he was no longer just the pianist who faced rejection. He was a musician finding his way, slowly building a bridge between his passion and the world. He had discovered that opportunities could come from unexpected places, and that encouragement, even from strangers, could spark a change. He continued to practice daily, preparing for the next chance, the next stage, and the next moment when his music could touch hearts again. And in his heart, he held on to the hope that one day, all the doors that had once been closed would finally open, and his music would be heard by many. Weeks after the small cafe performance, he continued to practice every day. Each morning, the piano in his small room became his world. He played scales, new pieces, and old favorites, always searching for ways to express more with each note. He felt that something bigger was waiting for him, and he wanted to be ready when it arrived. One afternoon, he received a call from a community center that had heard about his performance at the cafe. They were planning a weekend event, a festival for local talent, and they were short one performer. The person on the phone said they had been told he could play and asked if he was available. He felt a rush of excitement. This was not a big stage, but it was larger than anything he had done before. Without hesitation, he said yes. In the days leading up to the festival, he prepared with care. He chose pieces that he felt would capture the audience's attention but also express his personal style. He practiced tirelessly, paying attention to every pause, every touch on the keys. He imagined the people who would watch him, and he wanted to create a connection with each one. The thought of being seen, really seen, made him nervous, but he knew he had to embrace it. The day of the festival arrived. The community center was buzzing with people, families, and local visitors curious to see the talent show. He looked around and felt the weight of expectation. This was bigger than the cafe, bigger than any stage he had experienced. But it was also an opportunity he could not let slip away. When it was his turn, he carried his music to the piano set on a small raised platform. He could hear the murmur of the audience, the shuffling of feet, the faint clinking of cups and chairs. He closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. Then, as his fingers touched the keys, everything else disappeared. The noise, the crowd, the nervous energy. All of it melted into the music. From the first notes, he felt something shift. People stopped talking. Faces turned toward him. Children paused in their play, and older visitors leaned in, listening with curiosity and wonder. He poured himself into the music, letting each emotion guide his hands. There was joy, sorrow, hope, and longing, all flowing through him. The audience could feel it even if they did not know why. His music told a story they could understand without words. Midway through the performance, he noticed a woman in the front row, her eyes glistening with tears. He did not know her, but the sight made him play with even more heart. He realized that music had the power to touch lives, to reach places words could not. Every note mattered. Every pause mattered. Every subtle change in rhythm carried a message. He was no longer performing for recognition. He was performing to connect, to share what he carried inside. When the last note faded, there was silence for a moment, as if the audience was savoring what they had just heard. Then the applause came, soft at first, and then louder, stronger, more heartfelt. People stood, clapping, cheering, and smiling. Some approached him afterward, speaking about how the music made them feel, how it reminded them of memories or emotions they had not expressed in years. He was overwhelmed but grateful. This was more than applause. This was connection. After the festival, he began to receive invitations from other small venues and community events. Each opportunity was a chance to grow, to learn, and to be heard. He realized that the key was not waiting for a big break but creating moments where his music could shine. Every small stage, every audience, no matter how few people, was a step toward his dream. He continued to refine his skills, exploring new techniques and styles. He experimented with improvisation, learning to play with instinct and emotion rather than only following written music. This helped him develop a unique voice that was both personal and captivating. People began to notice that his performances were different, that they carried a depth and sincerity that was rare. As he gained experience, he also learned about the importance of presence. It was not just about playing the notes correctly. It was about engaging with the audience, making them feel like part of the music. He watched how small gestures, eye contact, and body language could enhance the emotional impact of a performance. This understanding became as important as the music itself. He also met other musicians along the way, some older, some his peers, who shared advice and encouragement. He learned from them but never lost his own style. He understood that authenticity was more important than imitation. He wanted the audience to hear his heart, not someone else's. Despite these opportunities, he still faced moments of doubt. Some events were poorly attended, some audiences were distracted, and some venues still treated him like a newcomer without value. But now he had the confidence to keep going. Each experience, good or bad, was part of his journey. He learned to focus on the joy of playing and the impact his music had, rather than external approval alone. In quiet moments, he reflected on how far he had come. From rejected auditions to small cafe performances, and now to community festivals, he saw growth not only in skill but in character. He learned patience, resilience, and the importance of staying true to himself. He understood that talent alone was not enough. Persistence, heart, and courage were equally necessary. He also realized that music had a ripple effect. The people he touched shared their experiences with others. Word of mouth began to spread. More invitations arrived, and he started to be recognized within his community as someone with genuine talent. He felt the warmth of encouragement from strangers and friends alike, and it strengthened his resolve. Even with growing recognition, he did not become complacent. Every day remained a practice, a step toward mastery, and a chance to express something meaningful. He continued to experiment, to challenge himself, and to seek new ways to connect with his audience. Each note was an opportunity to tell a story, to reach someone who might be quietly waiting to feel the music. As part 3 ends, he was no longer just a young pianist trying to be noticed. He had become a musician who understood the power of his gift and the responsibility to share it. He had learned that every stage, no matter the size, could become a place of transformation. He looked forward to the next opportunity, knowing that each performance was a chance to inspire, to move, and to change everything for someone listening. He held on to the hope that one day, a larger audience, a bigger stage, or even the world would hear his music, but he knew that even now, every small moment mattered and that he was ready for what lay ahead. The opportunity came unexpectedly. A larger event, one that drew people from across the city, had a slot open for a performer at the last minute. He received the call and could hardly believe it. This was more than he had ever dreamed of. The venue was bigger, the audience was larger, and the stakes felt higher than anything he had faced before. Still, he accepted without hesitation. He felt ready, not because he had achieved perfection, but because he had grown and learned through every challenge so far. In the days leading up to the performance, he focused on preparation like never before. He selected pieces that were meaningful to him, that carried emotion and depth. He practiced with intensity, imagining the crowd, imagining their reactions, and trying to make each note convey the feelings he had inside. His hands ached, his eyes tired, but he kept going, knowing that this could be the moment that changed everything. On the day of the performance, he arrived early. The venue was impressive, with a stage set up, lights bright, and rows of seats stretching far back. He felt a wave of nerves, a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was different from the small stages he had played before. Here, he would be seen by more people than ever, including critics and organizers who could influence his future. Yet, despite the fear, he felt a deep sense of purpose. He had a story to tell through his music, and he intended to tell it with all his heart. As he walked onto the stage, the audience clapped politely, curious about the newcomer. He took a seat at the grand piano, feeling its smooth keys under his fingers. For a moment, he paused, taking a deep breath. Then he began to play. The first notes were soft, tentative, almost as if testing the waters. But as the music continued, confidence grew. Each chord resonated through the hall, carrying emotion that reached the farthest corners of the room. He could feel the audience shift. Initially polite and distracted, they began to lean in, captivated by the sound. His music flowed naturally, sometimes gentle, sometimes powerful, with crescendos that made hearts race and pauses that held them in suspense. Every note was a message, every melody a story of struggle, hope, and perseverance. He realized that this was more than a performance. It was a conversation between him and everyone listening. Midway through the set, he glanced at the audience and noticed faces transformed by the music. People who had been talking stopped and listened. Some had tears in their eyes, while others smiled with joy. Children, who had wandered in, stopped to watch, captivated by the movement of his hands and the sound filling the hall. He felt an energy from the crowd that was different from anything before. It was as if the music had reached them in a way words never could. As he continued to play, he felt completely immersed. The past rejections, the long hours of practice, the small performances, they all led to this moment. He realized that everything he had gone through was shaping him for this performance. His fingers moved with confidence. His heart poured into every key, and he allowed himself to feel every emotion without holding back. The music was no longer just about him. It was about connecting with every person who was listening. When the final notes echoed through the hall, there was silence for a brief moment, a collective intake of breath as the audience absorbed what they had just experienced. Then the applause began, soft at first, then growing louder, filling the room with appreciation and admiration. People stood, clapping, cheering, some even shouting their approval. It was overwhelming, humbling, and thrilling all at once. He had never experienced anything like it. After the performance, people approached him, offering congratulations, sharing how the music had affected them. Some spoke about memories it brought back, others about emotions they hadn't expressed in years. He listened, grateful, realizing that this was the true reward. Not fame or recognition, but the impact his music could have on others. Each story, each smile, each tear was a testament to the connection he had achieved through his piano. In the following days, the response spread. Social media posts, word of mouth, and mentions in local news highlighted his performance. Invitations came from other events, bigger stages, and even professional musicians who wanted to collaborate. For the first time, he felt that all the effort, all the patience, and all the setbacks had led to something real. He had found a way to break through the barrier of obscurity and be recognized for his talent. Despite the growing attention, he remained grounded. He continued to practice daily, exploring new techniques and challenging himself with more complex pieces. He understood that this was only the beginning and that true mastery required constant effort. But he also knew that he had proven something important to himself. That persistence, passion, and authenticity could overcome doubt and rejection. He reflected on his journey, thinking about the early days of practicing alone, the countless rejections, and the moments of self-doubt. He realized that those experiences had not been obstacles but teachers. They had forced him to improve, to refine his music, and to develop resilience. Without them, he might not have been ready for the impact he could make now. He also noticed a change in himself. He played with more emotion, more presence, more connection to his audience. He had learned that performance was not only about skill but about communication, about inviting people into the story he was telling through his music. This understanding made each performance richer, more profound, and more meaningful. Even with success, he never forgot the small beginnings. The times he played in quiet parks, the small cafes, and community events were reminders of why he loved music in the first place. They kept him humble and focused on the essence of what mattered, the connection between the music and the listener. As he prepared for upcoming performances, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Each opportunity, whether large or small, was a chance to touch hearts, to inspire, and to share the beauty he found in music. He no longer played only for recognition. He played because it was who he was, and because he had a story that needed to be heard. Part 4 concludes with him standing at the threshold of something larger. He had moved from rejection and obscurity to recognition and connection. The audience had felt his music, and the world had begun to notice. Yet, he knew that the journey was ongoing, and the next stage, the next performance, held new possibilities. He was ready to continue, confident in his gift and determined to share it fully, knowing that his piano show could change everything, not just for him, but for everyone who listened. After the performance at the large venue, life began to shift in ways he had only dreamed of. Invitations came from bigger events, private gatherings, and even local media outlets. People wanted to hear him play, to feel the music he shared, and to meet the young pianist who had turned rejection into triumph. Each opportunity was another step forward, but he approached them all with the same humility and focus that had carried him this far. He continued to practice daily, understanding that talent alone could not sustain success. Every morning, the piano became his sanctuary. He explored new pieces, experimented with improvisation, and refined the music that had touched so many people. His dedication was unwavering. He understood that the journey was ongoing and that there would always be new challenges, no matter how far he had come. The recognition he received was humbling. People remembered him from the small cafes and community events, and they spoke about the growth they had seen in him. New listeners, too, discovered his music through social media, word of mouth, and coverage of his performances. The music that had once been heard by only a few now reached hundreds, and sometimes thousands of people. He felt gratitude but also responsibility. He wanted every note he played to honor the journey he had been through. One day, he was approached by the organizer of a prestigious concert series. They had heard about his story and wanted him to perform at an event that attracted music lovers, critics, and professional musicians. This was the kind of opportunity that could change a career. He felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. The stakes were higher than ever, but he also knew that he had faced rejection, small stages, and doubt before. He trusted himself and his music. He prepared for the concert with meticulous care. He selected pieces that would convey emotion and tell a story. He practiced tirelessly, imagining every detail of the stage, the audience, and the experience. Each day, he refined not only the technical aspects but also the feeling behind each note. He wanted the music to speak for him, to carry the essence of his journey and the lessons he had learned. When the day arrived, he stepped onto the grand stage, feeling the weight of expectation but also the strength of experience. The audience was large, the room filled with anticipation. He seated himself at the piano, took a deep breath, and began. The music flowed naturally, carrying emotion, passion, and a story of perseverance. Every note reached the audience, some with surprise, some with recognition, and many with deep emotion. As he played, he noticed the reactions around him. Some people closed their eyes, letting the music fill them. Others leaned forward, captivated by the melody and rhythm. A few even whispered to each other, moved by the performance. He realized that the connection he felt with the audience was mutual. They were experiencing the journey he had been on, sharing in the triumphs, struggles, and emotions embedded in the music. By the time he reached the final piece, the room was completely silent, every person present absorbed in the sound. The last note lingered, echoing in the space, and then there was a pause. The audience erupted into applause, standing and cheering, expressing appreciation in a way he had never imagined. He felt a sense of accomplishment not for recognition, but because the music had reached people in a meaningful way. He had shared his story without words, and it had been understood. After the performance, many approached him, offering praise and sharing how the music had affected them. Some spoke of memories it evoked, some of emotions they had not felt in years. He listened, grateful, and realized that this was the ultimate reward. His journey had taught him that success was not only about being seen, but about touching lives, inspiring others, and connecting through the art he loved. In the weeks that followed, he continued to receive invitations for performances, collaborations, and even teaching opportunities. He remained committed to practicing and growing, understanding that mastery required ongoing effort. Each performance became a chance to share, to inspire, and to refine his craft. He also began mentoring younger musicians, sharing the lessons of perseverance, patience, and passion that had guided him through his own journey. He reflected often on how far he had come. From rejected auditions to small cafes, community events, and large concert halls, he saw growth not only in skill but in character. He had learned resilience, patience, and the importance of believing in oneself. He had discovered that setbacks were not failures but opportunities to improve and prepare for the next challenge. Every rejection, every small audience, every moment of doubt had shaped him into the musician he had become. His music began to reach even wider audiences, through recordings, social media, and word of mouth. People were inspired not only by his skill but by his story. They saw a young pianist who had faced rejection, persevered, and remained true to himself. His journey became a symbol of hope for those struggling to be recognized, a reminder that persistence and authenticity could open doors. Despite growing fame and recognition, he remained humble. He never played for approval alone. Each note, each performance, was a dialogue with the audience, a chance to share the depth of emotion and experience he carried. He understood that music had the power to heal, to inspire, and to connect. This understanding drove him to continue performing with sincerity and dedication. He also discovered the joy of collaboration. Other musicians, inspired by his story and skill, invited him to work together on performances and compositions. Through these collaborations, he learned new techniques, explored different styles, and grew as an artist. Yet, he always stayed true to his own voice, ensuring that every performance carried the essence of who he was and what he had experienced. Over time, he became more than a pianist. He became an inspiration. People saw in him a reflection of their own struggles and hopes. His story was proof that even when doors close, persistence and passion can open new paths. He never stopped believing in the power of his music to make a difference, and he continued to dedicate himself to playing with heart, emotion, and authenticity. As Part 5 concludes, he stands on a stage, looking out at an audience that has come to hear his music, moved by his story, and touched by his journey. He reflects on the path he has walked, the early days of practice in quiet rooms, the rejections, the small performances, and the breakthroughs that led to recognition. He knows that the journey is ongoing, and that there will always be more stages, more listeners, and more opportunities to connect. But he also knows that he has already achieved something extraordinary. He has shared his heart through music and changed the lives of those who listen. He continues to play, not for fame, not for applause, but for the music itself, and for the connection it brings to the world. His piano show has indeed changed everything, not just for him, but for everyone who has heard it, felt it, and been inspired by it.